much for having us. We've been really looking forward to sharing our stories with y'all. I can talk a little bit about what it's like working to organize a major corporation under the current NLRA, the laws in America, and how they've changed and how they have not changed. As well as some of those challenges that we faced specifically with Starbucks. And Taylor is our strike expert, so I think she'll be giving a lot of really great stories and lessons from the strike that recently happened. So for background, I started working at Starbucks almost 2 years ago. I was in law school full time, and I was in the middle of like the Zoom school era. So I was feeling very kind of shut out from the community. And my local Starbucks was always just the most friendly faces, and I always wanted to be there. So I thought I'll start working there on the weekends. And it was about a year in when I first read the news about the Buffalo stores filing. And to be very upfront, I did not know what a union was because it's not really covered in our education system. I can't think of any time in high school that I really learned about unions. I think I learned a very conservative, historical perspective of what unions have done for labor law. And I also went to undergrad and got a degree in politics and law school. And throughout all of that, I still never really learned what a union is. And it wasn't until I read about these baristas in Buffalo and started to really hear what Starbucks was doing. That's when I started to Google what is a union. Because Starbucks was really upset about something and they were really backlashing against these baristas. So my store was the fifth one in the nation to file. And we were the first in New England to become a union. And the process was very difficult because Starbucks has a lot of money and a lot of power. And they will do absolutely everything in their power to stop us. So, as George mentioned, we have the NLRB here. And the NLRA, which is the law that allows us to organize, was enacted in the 1930s. And although it was seen as a favorable act for workers, it was also known to be a compromise. It wasn't what we completely wanted as workers, and it wasn't supposed to be the end-all be-all of labor rights. But unfortunately, where we stand in America, it has been the end-all be-all. So what that really means is we're operating under a set of laws that was created in the 1930s when we never had anything like a Starbucks, right? We were primarily thinking about factory workers. We were not thinking about billionaires who have, mega franchises. We were not thinking about Howard Schultz and his 9,800 Starbucks stores. So these laws have become really outdated, and it's allowed our employer to really use and abuse them to their advantage. So one of those examples is this process, this fight to unionize Starbucks. We only have 2% of Starbucks unionized. We have about 268 stores right now. And that's a really big accomplishment. I don't want to underscore that in any way, shape, or form, but it just shows how difficult it is to really unionize a company in America, because we have to go store by store, each individual location, one at a time. And right now, Starbucks wants to negotiate a contract with us, each individual store, one at a time. And when we know how long one contract can take, if you imagine us trying, if we were successful in getting all of these Starbucks locations unionized, we would never get contracts because they would draw it out forever. And it's very difficult because under the law, there's not a lot of support for us. And when there is support, it takes a long time for it to kick in. So, for example, one of the ways that this is also really harmful for organizing is, we've had a lot of employees get fired from Starbucks. And Starbucks can afford to do this. What they have in their favor is a very long legal process. And they have a lot of money, so they can sustain the legal process. They can challenge things and make it take even longer. And that hurts worker organizers because we can't afford a week without a paycheck, another 2 weeks, or months to years because we're waiting to be reinstated. So Starbucks can kind of afford to break the law and pay the consequences later because the immediate consequence is a greater payout for them. So we had, for example, 7 employees in Memphis, Tennessee, who were all abruptly fired. It's notable that they're all the people who were in the organizing committee at the store. So everyone who created that union and put the petition in for their store, they were abruptly fired shortly after filing, and they were all people of color. And it took a very long time in order for them to win their reinstatement. And we're incredibly excited that they did, in fact, win in the end. This was a major win for us, and we've continued to have more and more partners get reinstated over time. But the real problem here is that it took too long. They had to wait forever to get to that reinstatement. They have babies, they have children that they have to take care of, bills to pay. And they are also dealing with Starbucks, challenging their ability to even get an unemployment insurance. Like, they can't even get unemployment pay while they try to find another job or wait for their reinstatement. So it harms us in that short term. And that's their game. So the way that Starbucks has really been union busting us is by, either skirting the law, being very careful and cautious with how they abide by it, or just outright disobeying it and having us suffer those consequences to see if it's worth it to stall our union organizing. So when my store went through the process, we dealt with a lot of captive audience sessions where, we had our regional vice president come in. She did not like me. And, we had to listen to them tell us why unions are bad. And one of the biggest things I learned is that, your employer under the NLRA is allowed to basically lie to you. They are allowed to give you examples, but they can give you as little or as much context as they want for those examples. They can give you facts, but again, they can present the facts however they choose is fit. And the most shocking one to me is that they can give you their opinions, but under the law, they don't actually have to sincerely hold those opinions. They can lie and say, I think a union would be really bad for you, even if they actually believe a union is good. So that's what our employer is allowed to use as ammo against us. And it's very harmful because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm someone who did not have any understanding of what a union is. I really wish I could go back in time and ask myself a little bit before I heard about the Starbucks stores unionizing, because I would love to hear my definition of a union. But the problem is education is very inaccessible. Learning about what a union is and what it can do for you is one of the greatest challenges that we face. And so we're constantly fighting Starbucks with education and information, and that's the only way we win. But the challenge is that Starbucks has a lot of leeway under the law. So during these captive audience sessions, I really remember my coworkers, I could feel the fear when we would hear something like, if you guys unionize, you won't be able to transfer stores, or if you unionize, your benefits might be taken away. Things like that really, of course, are going to scare people. But when I did more research, I realized they were all not true, or they were presented in a really false, misleading light. And that is what Starbucks is up to. They pay millions and millions of dollars for attorneys to help them basically skirt the law or violate the law and pay the consequences later. And it's really challenging, but I do think it's been incredibly inspiring at the same time to see just how resilient we've all been through it. There have been partners who have just gone months and months without a paycheck, partners who have been denied promotions that were rightfully theirs, partners who have lost hours, people who have been here for a long time, like 15-year partners who have been fired for something as stupid as being 1 minute late. new rules being reinstated or completely made up and applied at, at the whim of your manager. I mean, these are all the reasons why we want a union in the first place. And it makes me very glad that we have fought for that, because once we get our contract, we can really hold Starbucks accountable. But in the meantime, this is their ammo and this is how they've been fighting us. So I think in that, perspective, it's very inspirational to see how many stores have continued to put themselves up for that fight. People who have, put their jobs on the line, knowing full well that if you're a prominent organizer, if you're a public organizer, you're not going to be treated very well by your manager. And so I think that that's been a source of hope in a lot of ways, is to see more and more people, despite this, say, no, I want to join you. And that was exactly where my initial instinct came from to join this movement too, was seeing those partners in Buffalo being just completely attacked by all these corporate managers, these high up CEO people, and wanting to stand with them. That's what really pulled me into the fight. And it's, I think, really inspirational to see that it continues to pull people in. So I'll hand it off to Taylor, because Taylor was actually, her store, one of her coworkers reached out to me early into my store winning, and they said that they wanted to go through the process as well. And they ended up being one of the most badass stores in Boston. So Taylor, do you want to talk a little bit about your store?